This is TWiT.
Last week we were talking about your very clever idea to create a kind of permanent post explaining Section 230, and it's divided up into like responses to common errors people make about Section 230. Everybody from the New York Times to this show. It's pretty common. People misunderstand what Section 230.
Mike, can you do me a big favor? Can you violate quarantine and go to New York and walk into Joe Scarborough's studio and sit him the F down and explain what the F Section 230 is? He's gone on a full moral panic tirade every morning. I think, here it comes. Oh no!
This is.
He's not the only one.
Oh, God, no.
That's true.
God, no.
That's true.
This is the post we mentioned last week. Hello, you've been referred here because you're wrong about Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, and which is great because we all need this link so that we can send people. And then it has, if you said, and then various things you might have said, like, well, once a company that starts moderating content, it's not a platform, it's a publisher. And then Mike says, I regret to inform you, you are wrong.
You are full of crap.
You were wrong. So honestly, it is complicated. It's hard to understand. There's really two parts to 230. And so it's confusing to people. None more confused than the Congress of the United States of America, which consistently seems to not only misunderstand 230, even though they enacted it as part of the Communications Decency Act, the only part that's still around, but they constantly are trying to undermine it most lately with the Earn It Act.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you've taken this on because honestly, I can't.
Sometimes I feel like I am the last man fighting this fire, but
you and Jeff Kossoff.
Yeah.
It's only 26 words, but it seems to be hard to understand.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if you actually read it, it shouldn't be that hard to understand. I think part of the problem is that a lot of the people criticizing it have never even bothered to read it, even though it is it's pretty short and sweet.
Yeah.
But and if they haven't read it, then, or if they read it and they still don't understand it, they can read Jeff's book, which is quite readable and really enjoyable. Even if you're not deep in the weeds on these things, I actually, the funny thing I've said about Jeff's book is that when I got it, I figured, I'll flip through it and skim it, but I know the story of 230 and I know the law and I know the history and the cases and all that kind of stuff. And it's just sucked me in because it's so well written and so interesting. And it has all sorts of information and, details that I didn't even know, even though I kind of live in this world. So it's a great book. I'm sure you guys have recommended it before, but I think
Jeff Kossoff, the 26 words that created the internet. Please do pick it up.
Yeah. I have it. I haven't read it.
You should. Once you start,
very good.
It really does. It sucks you in.
Okay.
I know, because you think here's a book about a law, like an entire book about a single law about the internet. How interesting can it be? And it is the type of book that normally I would get and put on my shelf and never actually read. But I am telling you, it is worth actually trying to read it.
Yeah, I put it there so people will think I've read it. That's the whole thing.
Right.
So, yeah, that would be me, just sort of a poser with it kind of thing.
Oh, as Jeff says. Yeah, right. Why is 230 important?
It's what Jeff's book, the subtitle says. It created the internet. It created the modern internet. It's kind of incredible to think about it, but you look at kind of the history of how the internet came about, and even if you go back like 100 years and you go to the history of like television and radio and especially radio and how that came about, where in the early days radio had a chance to be sort of the proto-internet, where it could be anybody communicating with anybody. And it switched, and there were powers that be that sort of forced it into being just a broadcast medium. So, a sort of one-to-many situation, and you lost the ability for it to be, one-to-one, one-to-many kind of communications.
I think the internet. Marconi actually said that. He said, "Why would you want to do one-to-many? That seems like a waste."
it was not his intention, certainly. No. And then you have something like Section 230, which somewhat accidentally really set the internet to be this platform that could do many-to-many communication and allow people to have their voice online. And some people like to claim that it's like the biggest gift to big tech or whatever, but I think it's actually the biggest gift to free speech, because it really set it up so that internet sites could host speech without being afraid of being sued out of existence because somebody posted something that was defamatory or otherwise violated the law.
It's why we can have a chat room. It's why your blog, people's blogs can have comments. Google has the resources to protect itself, but do you to protect yourself because your blog comments? So it's important that we have that.
And I would go even further than that. The things that some people don't understand is that 230 technically protects users as well. So like the comment space, if you post something on Facebook and then the comment space beneath your post, if somebody says something there, you want to be protected. And 230 does that. 230 protects you. It protects their cases involving people forwarding an email. And getting sued because they forwarded an email, and 230 protected them also. So it does a whole bunch of things that actually protects the free speech of everybody using the internet. And without it, it would stifle speech and create a real chilling effect on the internet and the way it functions. And we'd have something very different, probably something a lot more akin to broadcast television and radio, rather than something where anybody can communicate.
Which is exactly why the broadcasters and the radio people want it that way.
Yes.
Well,
what
makes this? What makes it so easy to misconstrue this Section 230? Because so many people are getting it wrong and don't quite understand it. Is it the language, or what is it? Because nobody seems to get this right.
Yeah, I wish I knew, right? I kind of wish I could go into some of the brains of the people who are misconstruing it, because some are doing it deliberately. Some I think are. I think a lot of people just think that this is the way it should be. And they don't bother to read the law, and they assume that the law was put in place for a certain reason, or somebody, said that the law should be this way for a certain reason. And then people have just run with it. And it's really strange, because certainly among politicians, they know what the law says, and they're just deliberately misrepresenting it. And so you have a bunch of senators mainly who have, gone out of the way to misrepresent what the law says. And then what's funny, of course, is now they're introducing all these bills to try and turn the law into what they said it already said, which should sort of indicate that they know that they were being misleading before.